Cassandra, thank you so much for joining me today on Spirit Science Live.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I was just reviewing your website and all of the stuff that you do, and you do a lot of stuff. I was very impressed to see like sort of this wide range of everything from personal and business mentorship. You have a book, you have a podcast, you have all sorts of courses that you offer and everything. It's really impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, I do a lot. One of the projects this year is definitely streamlining everything because I am multi-passionate to a fault, probably.
Definitely. When, or rather, how long have you been doing all of this stuff for?
It started off more in the realm of my awakening around food and my body and that whole conversation. And that was about when I'm trying to think, 12 years ago now.
Wow.
So it feels crazy. I don't feel like I'm old enough to be doing anything for 12 years, but here I am. I totally am. And I started it just because I had my own after struggling with my body for many, many years. My first awakening, I call it awakening now. At the time, I had no idea what was going on. It was just, I had my kind of like what some people would call a come to Jesus or a rock bottom or that kind of bottom moment where I just realized the way that I was going and my relationship with myself and my physical body was so toxic that something needed to change. And I had a bit of divine intervention in the form of some physical ailments that came up, and that really helped me start tapping in and wanting to listen to my body. And I had a very natural reaction, that once I kind of had this epiphany about things and I started communicating with my body and I shifted the way I eat and how I did things in my life. I just naturally wanted to share it with friends, and I had a blog mostly for my girlfriends in college, and to keep them, in the loop of all the things that was happening and stuff like that. And it just kind of took off from there. It was a creative passion project, of sharing my own adventure. And I feel like it still is that in so many ways.
That's amazing, and it really, I mean, it really just goes to show like how one person's transformation can go to impact so many. Because you have, I mean, you like with group coaching and all these different things that you do, you've taken your business into helping other people make their dreams come true as well, haven't you?
Absolutely. Well, I think I knew, you know, so this is a when it's a kind of funny, weird story, but I look back on it lovingly. I don't know if you remember True Hollywood Stories. I don't know if they're still around right now, but they were like this. This is like back in the day. Like I was probably this is probably really early 90s because I was in elementary school or something, right? And there were these like on this channel, the Entertainment channel or whatnot, and it would kind of be like a bio of a celebrity, but they would always pick these celebrities that came from like these had like challenges along the way, nobody believed in them, or had like a drug problem, or had like a rough family life. There was always like these celebrities that you would look at and see them on the red carpet or on stage at the Grammys or something, and you'd be like, oh, like how did, of course they got there, they're special, right? And I used to live for this show. It was a big coping mechanism of mine growing up when like things were rough at home and I was like kind of dealing with my own stuff. I would fall asleep watching it, looking and thinking like, wow, if these people can do that, like then I can do that in my own way, right? And thinking I want to be someone that one day will get to tell my stories and have people that look at me and say, oh, she's so successful, look at what she's done with her life, and I get to be the one to say, well, if I could do it, anyone can do it. And so I think that's what fuels my programs and my group coaching and the books and literally everything I do is just trying to show people in every way I possibly can that I'm completely, I would say I'm normal. I'm not normal. I'm very weird. but but I'm normal in the way that like I didn't, not, there's nothing special about me that someone else doesn't equally have, and someone else couldn't equally tap into the same things that I tapped into to get to where I'm at, or more likely their version of where they're.
Sorry, I had to pause for a second because the video froze right at the audio and video froze right at the last second of your. And I was like, I didn't want to interrupt you in case you kept going, but we're getting back here now. But that's amazing. That's like so, and the fact that and you're coaching people in doing this kind of stuff now. Did you have a mentor or a guide or someone to help you kind of get to this point along your journey, or was it you're more of like, I just gotta figure it all out myself every step along the way?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, when I was doing this was like, we're talking like 2008, when all of this was going on. So having I didn't even know coaches existed. I didn't even know like bloggers were a thing. Like this was so before like the culture we live in today,
Yeah.
that I did take a lot of it into my own hands. I would say I didn't have my first mentor probably maybe for 6 years. And that was just when like it was becoming like a thing I was even aware of, once that happened. But a lot of it was me going to the library back in the day and like reading a bunch of different books that kind of came to me. A lot of it was my own personal, like just following my intuition, like having those initial conversations with my higher power or my intuition were almost instinctual. And they were just something that I was like, oh, okay, that's a new thing I just did tonight. Like, that felt good. Let me try that again. It was very like experimental. And there were a lot of times, especially after, I had my much bigger awakening when I was 25, and my little brother got diagnosed with a terminal condition. And I really like hit rock. I would say I was depressed, but I don't call it depression because it was just deep sadness at a situation that was happening. But I went into that deep sadness, and through that I needed to find like meaning and purpose in life. Like I literally was like, why am I here? Like this seems awful. And through that, finding like A Course in Miracles, finding, all different spiritual books, like the I Ching, like talking to my spirit guides, like all just like, and I remember, back in the day, 25, 26, being like, I can never go back. Like I'm living in this different space now, and I didn't know anyone else. Like it was very lonely because I knew not one person that, like, none of my friends I could talk to about it really. Like at that time, it was very much like a personal experience. So then a few years later, once I found like some person that I felt was like able to do that, that she ended up being my first mentor, because I was just like, oh my God, someone else thinks of the world in this way or sees things in this way. And that was just, I remember at the time, like she was way more than I could afford, but I just made it, I made it work, which I mean, and now looking at that amount, it wasn't a lot, but I didn't have any money when at that time. But it was so therapeutic, and it was so important for me because it really helped me expand on my journey. And it really, more than anything, I think reassured me that all the things that I was experiencing or thinking or moving through were valid. And that I wasn't alone, and that it wasn't like just my own crazy little dream world that I had created.
Yeah, I completely get that. I had the same thing when I first started really having my own spiritual awakening. The I remember trying to talk about it with friends and people in my life, and I very quickly found myself even more alone than I was before, because people were like, "Ooh, he went crazy. He
Yeah.
went absolutely batshit insane. Stay away from him." And I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh crap. Okay, well, I guess I'm on my own here." So
Yeah,
I
you
know the
have that.
feeling.
Yeah, you have that moment where you're like, oh, okay, can't, I have to be careful. And now it's kind of amazing because it's so mainstream now. Maybe it's not like, it's more mainstream than I think it's ever been. And so it like blows my mind when I go into like Urban Outfitters and Anthropology, and there's like sage bundles and like spell kits and like all these like know your astrology. And I'm like, oh my God, like, just 8 years ago, maybe that was like so crazy. Like you had to go to like, I remember going to this little place in the East Village called Enchantment, which was like this like hidden little like magical store or whatever. You had to like have these little places. You couldn't just buy it, on Amazon or whatever. A different world. But I think, since then, with mentorship and giving me blocks and a lot of blocks that were from my childhood that had really informed my limiting beliefs. And the effect of that mentorship on me, I think, was such a push to what I do today, because literally changed my life in such a big way. Just kind of cleaning up that mess, I would say, that was made in childhood, and really realizing how there were so many little insidious ways I was being that came from these beliefs of not feeling lovable, not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy. And it was so crazy because even at that time in my life, if people outwardly had looked at me, like I had already published my first book, I, was pretty out there, I'd already been on TV, like people would just be like, oh, she's so confident, like she's killing it, like all of that. And that really wasn't my personal reality, when I was moving through life. And it caused me so much day to day anxiety and overwhelm and doubting myself constantly, and really doing the work, showing up for that. And I think that work, some stuff I do believe, really requires having another person just hold you through it, you know, because the work is so intense that I know, like, with my clients when we do it one-on-one, where some of them usually will, do like a workshop or something before that, and they're like, oh, it's so like, I love knowing that I'm going to have to see you and you're going to like force me to keep going with it, right? And we're going to, because it's messy and it's stuff that sometimes we don't want to look at. But I think I know that showing up for that for me was really what completely catapulted my life and completely shifted me on such a foundational level. And so that is a big part of all the work I do with people, is really, getting really clear on that vision and that dream, and like, how do they believe the world works? How do they connect to their divine source and their divine support squad, but also not shying away from being like, okay, when we think about that like big juicy thing that you want, like, what's the negative talk that comes up? What are the like memories or the evidence that you've gathered saying that, like, well, some people can do that, but you, I don't know, you know? And clearing that out of the way, because I think once we kind of clear a lot of that junk out of the way, it's really magical and beautiful how life kind of just can flow and can just kind of, you know, push you along the stream there.
Hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that's been a recurring theme both in my own personal life and also like with a lot of the people I've been talking to, even on this podcast, is um, the awareness of that, the awareness of that, addressing the internal world, the internal reality first, right? Addressing our beliefs, so instead of trying to change the symptoms, going to the root cause and recognizing that it's like going within first. And one of the things I kind of wanted to ask you, is jumping back a little bit, but I think it's all very related, is that earlier on, one of the words you used to describe this shift that you went through was a come to Jesus moment. And I wanted to ask you, like, did you actually have like specifically coming to Jesus, or was that sort of just like a general way that you described of like coming to terms with, your soul, like, and this more spiritual aligned path?
Yeah. I love Jesus and Mary Magdalene and all the different ascended masters. I have a unique relationship, I think, with Jesus and Mary Magdalene. But that moment that I was describing was more of like a general, like talking to a higher power. That first moment was, I mean, I was raised Catholic, but, somewhere along the lines in like high school or college, I just kind of like did my own thing. I always have believed in something, but I've always been kind of like working on my own details about it. And so in that moment, I was literally lying on the bathroom floor in my like New York City apartment after like crying for 4 hours, being like, what is life? What am I doing? And then it was like, I just, for the first time, very deeply and truly was like, God, Jesus, anyone? Like, and had this moment where I did kind of genuinely come to a higher power. I would say it was like more like a higher power in general. I said God, that was like what I said in that moment. But yeah, and just asked for help, and I got it. I felt this overwhelming feeling, which I've had times after that in moments like that of deep vulnerability, where I was just like, I don't know what to do, and I just kind of spilled my heart out to God. And I felt like this cloak kind of warmth and love encapsulate my body, and it wasn't like an answer, it was just like a feeling of being held in that moment. And then I kind of just knew I needed to go to sleep. And then after that, it was like 6 a.m. at this time. I'd been crying all night. And I went to sleep that night. I felt like very like just kind of peaceful after that. And then the next morning I woke up and I was like, I need to meditate. And I wasn't a meditator before that. I was just like, I need to meditate. So I went on YouTube and looked up some meditations, and I started meditating. So anyway, yeah. So that was that moment. And I think, in different times in my life, I've probably had different, yeah, I say like come to Jesus because I think it's like a moment where you just get so desperate and you get so keenly aware that your human does not know what's going on, or does not know how to handle what's going on, or to get through what's going on in that way, that you just need some divine intervention. Since then, I just invite the divine into my life every day. So I hope to have less of those dramatic moments.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I like that. Like it's almost as if first, that ask and you shall receive, just like opening yourself up. You received a feeling that led you on, like that sort of that the way you've described it is like being held, which is a beautiful, just like that nurturing support. And then now you not only, it's like you're calling it in all the time for yourself, but you're also bringing that to other people who might not even be thinking to ask, in that higher sense, like being able to almost like to transmit that frequency, transmit that vibe from people, from the higher realms or the divine to people that you're working with, so that they can be held too. Because that's I think one of the ways that you described even the work that you do, right? It's like just like supporting people. It's not about like fixing them. It's like just holding them so that they can do that work themselves.
Oh, absolutely. Like every client call we do, we start off and we do a meditation, and we literally call in like the divine love within us to surround us in like a little capsule. And then I call in their divine support squad, and we feel their support, and we ask them for guidance. And we had the whole session held by their angels and their guides and their higher power. And one of the first things I also do in a lot of my processes is clear up people's relationship. And up until that point in my life, have that kind of messy, complicated relationship because maybe of how they grew up with a religion or different things that they've explored. And they haven't really taken the time to sit with themselves and say, what do I want my relationship to be like with the divine, right? Whether you call it the divine or source or universe or God or Jesus or Buddha or whoever, what do I want to call it, right? Like even getting clear on what rings true to me and being okay with whatever that is, right? If, I have some friends that they can only call it source, right? Like if they call it by anything other than source, it doesn't feel right to them. And I'm like, that's fine. That's perfect. Right. Like, just know it's like if, it's like if you have like a pet or a friend, honestly, maybe a friend's a better metaphor. You have a friend, right? And with you and that friend, they're like, oh, you can, their name is Rebecca. And they're like, you can call me Becky. Right. And that's like your thing. Right? Maybe with her boss, she's like, no, you can call me Rebecca. Right? And it's like, you get to have that intimate relationship. You get to decide what do you feel like calling it? How do you want to talk to your source or your higher power? Like for me, it's very casual. For some people, it's more, I don't know.
Orthodox, maybe traditional.
Yeah, it's a little bit more traditional. It's a little bit more of an ordeal. It's like, oh, I have to pray in a certain way. And I'm like, no, I could be at Whole Foods and be like, God, what should I get the hummus? No. Yeah. And I think it's important to just have that, have that moment with yourself to figure it out, because I think so many people shy away from having that strong connection because they just haven't clarified what it really means to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they're still looking too, right? Like that's the whole atheist or agnostic and just not even really sure, maybe not even wanting to touch it because it's such a sensitive subject for so many, maybe even including themselves. I'm I've seen this happen a lot of people coming, being raised in a certain way and then kind of going off on their own path after a certain point because they're like, it's just, I was forced to go to church all the time when I was a kid and it sucked and it was boring and I hated it. And then they go off on their own path and then they get into anarchy or they get into, just super atheist, or they get into this or that or whatever. Maybe it's like an Eastern path, Buddhism, or they're meditating with Krishna or whatever. And then eventually, having been separated from the thing for so long that you were raised in, you can kind of come back around and have a new appreciation, a new awareness of that thing, right?
Absolutely. It's because we all deeply just want and desire, all deeply desire, I think, our own unique relationship with it. So when we feel like something is forced down our throat, it doesn't matter if it's the best in the world. I have friends that grew up with parents that wanted them to meditate and connect, what was kind of very different than my you go into church, you go into Sunday school, all the stuff. And me now thinks oh, little Cassandra would have loved that. That would have been so cool, getting to meditate with my parents, right? But maybe not, right? Because a lot of those kids are they do that for a certain age and then they do the same thing that the rest of us do too, right? And are no, mom and dad meditate. I want to try Judaism. I want to try this. I want to try that. And it's because I think deep down, we're just it's part of our journey, right? It's part of our journey to figure it out for ourselves. So if we're going to be presented with something, more than likely, we're going to push back a little bit on that. And I think it's really, I love that. Now it's so my dad still goes to church all the time, right? And so when I'm home, I love going to church with my dad and getting to have like an honest conversation about it, right? And be like, oh, like, here's the things I really liked from the sermon today. Here was my interpretation actually of that passage. Like, here's what I didn't agree with, and getting it to be like, oh, like, I can be like an active interpreter, connector to this work, right? And I think also the more you study and the more you learn, like, so like all of the major religions, that they're all kind of reaching for the same thing, right? They all have this principle of oneness under it, right? They all want us to have that connection with the divine. They all want us to know that we are on some level part of the divine, right? And so when you get it down, a lot of them really are united. It's just kind of different ways of putting that in different lenses, and other kind of constructs that came along with that as well. So I think they're all fascinating. And I think it's just so, for me, I think it's just so important to have that relationship and to be able to lean on it and to allow it to guide you in life.
So maybe then even like one of the most valuable things that parents can teach their kids is to not be so rigidly attached, and or at least be open to exploring the various paths that are out there, so that when that time comes and the child wants to break away and try this or try that, they're not feeling like they have to separate from the thing that they were raised in, whatever that is, and they have the support of their family or their parents, to be able to explore. They have the mindset that exploring is good and it's healthy and it's okay and it's a good thing to do.
Absolutely. I think that, yeah, curiosity. I think curiosity should be always like encouraged, and yeah, and it's something for even us, like even as we're older, right? Is to like just be curious. Like, I love learning about other people's cultures and religions and beliefs and how they do their spiritual practice. And, I think it's all fascinating. And I think all of us, um, everything has some gold in it, right? That can be harvested. And yeah, and then when we encourage that, then we feel more free, right? Then you end up having a kid that has a stronger relationship to the divine, because they're kind of like figuring it out and molding it on their own.
Yeah, definitely. So jumping back to your work here a little bit, I'm curious to ask, like it seemed as though a lot of the work that you're doing on your website, I'm just looking here because I have your site open on my other monitor. Like a lot of your work, based on what I've seen, is tailored toward women. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I kind of want to just talk to you a little bit more about that. Would you identify as more in like a feminist path, or is it just like, I just help women and it's just very like less labels,
No, I help women just because I know women's struggles intimately.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that, well, there's a lot of things, and I get this all the time. I have men come to me all the time being like, really, Cass, come on. Like, and I love all my men followers on the podcast and on Instagram, and they're awesome. I love men. I have it's not like that. It's just, I feel like a lot of the topics that women are going through right now, I can just obviously deeply relate to. And I want to be able to create safe spaces for women where they feel like they can be 110% vulnerable about their experience and about what's going on. And so I do find that the energy is different when it's a co-ed mix. And also like getting into like the wisdom of our cycles, right? Getting into the feminine balancing that women have to do, and even the societal roles. Like, there's just so many things that are specific to women that I really like to dive into that I don't know if they would be as applicable to men. So I just keep it women, because that's what I know and that's what I have my experience being, and knowing what that's like to move through. And all, especially right now, we're going through such an awakening for everyone, but men and women are going to have their own kind of different things that they're moving through around this, you know, and how they're showing up in new roles, and how they're both kind of, you know, whatever you want to call it, like breaking down the patriarchy, or, you know, shifting shifting things. And women are really in a unique time where they have more on their plate than ever. They have more things expected of them than ever. And trying to formulate what that looks like in healthy balance, what that looks like in alignment with their souls, and to be able to talk safely about the trickiness of one, getting into relationship right now, and finding that dynamic, and how do you own that dynamic, and how do you own the parts of you that still deeply wants to be in the feminine receiving, right, with the parts of you that's also in your masculine achieving and success. And so anyway, long story short, I feel like there's just the intricacy and the identifying experience that I relate to. So that's why I just stick to women.
Absolutely. I'm going to pause for a second too, because it got really choppy. I don't know. Can you still see me, hear me?
Yeah, I can still see you.
Okay. So I want to ask more about this, because even for me, you know, not being a woman, but also wanting to connect with my inner feminine, like I find that like I want to be able to relate, or at least to understand, and to be able to connect, you know, like, because I think there has been a big divide between the masculine and the feminine, just looking at the, you know, just the general energy in our species for so long, in terms of, yeah, like societal roles and everything like that. And there's clearly biological differences, right, between the masculine and feminine body, but there's also on that like spiritual energetic level where we all have both within us, right? You know, if you want to look at it through like XY chromosomes and this and that, but we all still have the ability to connect with each other, and I think understand each other. So I guess I'd be curious, you know, for myself and all the men listening, like, what would you say would be something very important for men to understand about women that maybe has been taken for granted or not as well understood, that is changing in these times that we're in right now?
Ooh, I think so many things. I think, you know, what my personal thoughts on like the masculine feminine thing, I do obviously agree. We both have both inside of us, and we play on both at different times. But I do believe that if you came here and decided to identify as a man during this lifetime, or decided to identify as a woman, you kind of picked a different major, right? So
yeah, okay.
It's like I decided to I'm majoring in masculine with a strong minor in the feminine, or I'm majoring in feminine with a minor in the masculine. This is my personal belief on it, because I think they both have different sets of lessons. That being said, you know, as a man, if you identify more in, and let's throw out masculine and feminine, because I feel like then it gets too tricky. So there's receiving and then there's giving, right? And obviously we all do both, right? But it's, you know, it's like, are you in relationship, do you find yourself wanting to be more of like the tree, right? Are you like a strong structure that wants to provide support, right? That wants to kind of be there, right? Or do you desire to be like the wind, right? Or kind of held by the tree, right? Do you want that? So I think those are like two defining things as well. And I think what's going on, especially for a lot of women right now, is a lot of women are having an identity crisis side with the feminine, because now it's like more safe and more normal to have feelings and be in touch with their emotions and, their spiritual side and stuff, which is amazing, that they're having strides on that. But then it's like they're trying to find their balance there too. Like, well, what's the balance between like my masculine, like go, 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 do, provide, be strong, like that, and that emotional side. Whereas with women, I think a lot of women right now, where men could be really supportive if they want, women are struggling with feeling like they have to do everything, right? Feeling like, okay, I have to go out and be successful, right? I gotta be, I gotta, I gotta make the money. I gotta get the career advancements. I also need to have the children and then be a good mom and make sure like dinner's ready, our home looks like Pinterest worthy, and then be like, like sexy, lover for my husband too. And also like I also still have that feminine part of me that wants to like be treated like a lady, right, and taken care of. And so it's very complex, I think, for women right now, in where they're exploring and even honoring like a lot of the stuff that comes up with some of my clients is that they feel so comfortable and then they feel like this is so, kind of like a cross section of what's going on, at least for the, this generation of, let's say, 25 to 45-year-old women that are so comfortable asserting their goals and their needs when it comes to business and what they want to make financially and all of that stuff, but feel way more shy about their desires to be a wife and a mom, right? That feel like almost like gotta put that a little bit to the side because, everyone's going to give me a high five when I'm like, I want to be a 7-figure entrepreneur. Right. Right. And then when I'm like, oh, like actually, like, I can't wait to be a mom. Right. And it's just, now it's kind of like the reverse of what was going on. And so much of that is because, for how many years we had these very stereotypical roles. We had, the man went out and provided and the women stayed home with the kids. And yeah. And so I think it's just getting a little bit more individual. And now we're having to, accept, we've seen the shadow side of all of it, right? We've seen the shadow side of like the hyper masculine, right? And we've seen the shadow side of, a woman kind of feeling suppressed, right, by that. And so, but now it's kind of like we have to reclaim so much of what our soul's desires actually are and own that. I believe most women, even if they are, ambitious and in their masculine around work, ultimately really still love feeling like they can be in their feminine at home, right? And ultimately still love feeling like they can. I once read this book where this very successful like author, money person or whatever, she was talking about how, her relationship with her husband. And she was like, I melt like butter on toast when I'm with him. Right. And I like it because I have to go out in the world and be like, this like powerful, and I love that. Right. But I love that I get to come home and like melt. Right. And I remember reading that and being like, yes, that. Like that's, that, and I think a lot of women relate to that. So yeah, I don't know if that's like something for men to know. I feel like men are going through their own version of identity crisis. And I think we're moving more towards, in general, a society where we don't have these polarized roles, but we still need to be able to give ourselves permission to claim our soul desires, right? And to know that like if as a man, your soul desires to be a provider, and have that kind of a role, then that's fine. And if as a man, your soul desires to be a stay-at-home dad and, you know, partner up perhaps with a woman that, or another man or a partner who is in that more, you know, provider role, then that's fine too, you know. And same thing for women, that it's okay. So many of the clients I've had the past couple years, like I said, I've had to kind of open and allow them to want the more feminine things too, right? To want to be taken care of, to want to have children, and to make, you know, finding a relationship a priority, making space for that. So I think we're all kind of, you know, in a sensitive place. So the more that we handle each other with compassion, and the more that we just, I think, get really honest and open with like the truth of what we want, right? No matter what that is, the sooner we get open and honest about the truth of what we want and release the judgment around that, the easier it's going to be for us to present that to the world and get it, right? And get someone that, like, not everyone's going to get it, right? But the more that you're clear on it, then the easier you can attract whatever it is you need to fulfill it.
Yeah. It's almost like switching your major. You're talking about, you know, like what major you're in life, more of a masculine path or a feminine path, and being able to, you know, have that, like, this part of your life in these years or whatever, you know, you focus very on the business, but then maybe the family or the relationship starts to become more important, and you start to take up that minor, and then soon that becomes the major because it's so important to you that you're really wanting to like evolve in that area.
Yeah.
And
I really believe that our desires are divine, right? I believe that, like, the things that we think about and the things that we, you know, kind of lean towards is our soul's GPS leading us in that direction. So, and oftentimes these days that manifests as like you swiping on Instagram and being like, oh, you know, wow, like I'm looking at all these, happy couples around the holidays or whatever, and you're like, I've been like, neck deep in my business for 4 years and haven't really gone on any dates. Maybe this is like a little ping to say, open yourself up to dating someone, right? And I think it's just leaning into that. And similarly, I have vice versa, right? I have women that I work with that have been the mom and the wife role that are now like, actually, like, I have all these passions and I have all this creative energy and I want to, start my own business and I want to do that. And I think exactly like you said, it's just kind of honoring where you're at and what your truth is and your desires, and you get to change your major. Like, you get to change your major. And also, just because you change your major for a season doesn't mean like doesn't mean that you can't ultimately. I think more and more of us want all of it, right? And I like to say, like, you can have it all but not all at once. So we have to, I like to use the analogy because I'm a cook, so of like back burner and front burner, right? You're going to have back burner things in your life. You're going to have front burner things. So sometimes, like, you're going to have work on the front burner, and that's the thing that you're stirring, right? And you have like the relationship simmering in the back, because that's kind of like just chilling, or vice versa. Like with your health, sometimes your health's on the front burner and you're like, no, this is like a season where I'm focusing on my health. And I think you just know what's on the front burner and the back burner, and remember, it can all be on the stove.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I feel like too, I don't know if this will be resonant with everyone listening too, but just even listening to what you're describing, you're saying like a lot of women are feeling like they have to do everything and be everything, and you're listing off all these different aspects, and I feel like that can be true for men too, with the exception that not all men are necessarily looking to be that expansive. I think that's maybe one of the benefits of, benefit and maybe curse at the same time. Like for the feminine consciousness, the kind of way of thinking is it is very expansive. It is very bigger picture, and like water just seeping into every crack. Whereas the masculine often kind of gets very into that single focused mindset. But I can say, at least for myself, is I like the prospect of embodying, it's like, I don't have kids at this stage in my life. I don't know if I will, maybe if I meet the right person one day, but it's like, if that should come to pass, being like that really good father, embodying both, it's like both the strong masculine and that nurturing motherly feminine into a like a really harmonious version of me that takes really good care of those around me in a nurturing sense, but also embodying the more masculine components in as it relates to the work and the drive that I have and this and that. So I feel like I want to be able to embody all of that. But again, yeah, it's like you're saying, it's like maybe not all at once. There's like a learning process. I'm learning this right now, and then I'm learning that. And then, at different stages in your life, you take on different things. And maybe for men listening too, it's like we can take a page out of what the woman handbook, or what you're describing, of saying like it's okay to expand into areas that maybe is not as generally considered a masculine role, because it'll expand our sense of self. It'll expand what we're capable of. And in doing so, we might even bring a little bit more quality to the things that we are currently focused on, right? Like even as, for that kind of that businessman archetype of very focused, wears a suit, gets the work done, like for that role, I found even personally that like being really close and compassionate and connected to my team has really made the team so much stronger than if I was just like some hard ass who didn't care about anyone's feelings, which is like, just get this video done. I don't care how long it takes, just do it. It's like, no, let's talk about it. Let's connect. I think that we can learn a lot from each other if we're just willing to open up and listen.
Oh, absolutely. And I think everyone that's listening to this is definitely here to have an expansive soul journey, right? And so it is about leaning into that. And it's about also leaning into not just like the things you do, but how do I want to do them? How do I want to show up for them? I have this program that's going to be coming out called Divinely Design Your Life. And one of the things we do is called quantum embodiment. And it's really thinking about, and reminded me of it when you were talking about like, the dad and then the businessman, right? And it's like, to me, when I hear you say that, that tells me that's like your version of like the highest expression of yourself in those roles, right? Like the highest expression of yourself as a dad is being able to, hold that kind of masculine structure, like you're safe, I got you, but also having a feminine where you're like nurturing, nourishing, and taking care of them, right? And so I think it's a really fun exercise, man, woman, anyone, to think about the different roles or the different things, the different complexities, even if you're not in like a relationship, even just how you do relationship with friends, or how you do dating, or how you do, interacting with the barista at the coffee shop, right? And saying what is the highest expression of myself in these different aspects. And it's a great, like, for the quantum embodiment, it's part of bringing the vision that we have, because I believe that we all, like, when we sit down and we meditate, we visualize, or even like just like fantasize kind of, right, during the day, we all have this like 2.0 version of ourselves, right? There's like where I'm at now, and then there's like me, like my A game, or like the person that I strive to be, how I strive to show up, me being fully expansive and fully like embodied, and my like best version or whatever, right? And when we take that and then we bring that version of us and we say, okay, now what does it look like in all these different scenarios, right? And even if you think about it, let's say someone wants to be that business person, right? But they don't even have a team right now, just work for themselves, or maybe they work in an office, right? So it's not really their reality. It's asking, okay, well, what about how would I have to show up if that was my reality? And how would that shift, right? Because oftentimes when we think like, oh, well, if I was a dad, then I would show up like that, right? Or if I was a CEO or whatever it is, I would show up like that, right? But it's like, what if we take that highest expression of where perhaps we desire to go, or we hope to go, or it's a possibility we could go, and bring it down into how we show up today, and start embodying that now in the different everything from, obviously, I think the easiest thing, maybe not the easiest thing, but like the the most obvious thing is to start showing up in your interactions that way. Start treating yourself that way, right? It's like, if you start pretending or rather embodying the person that shows up in this way in relationships, right? Or that shows up this way when it comes to business. So many, the example you gave in the work is, so, so many people are like, oh, well, I'll be that kind of boss when I'm running like a 7-figure business, right? And it's like, no, if you're not that boss when it's like you and some freelancers, you're not going to be that boss when you run a 7-figure business. And it's when you embody it now and you start doing that now, and in that lesson, we also do some things like shifting, like kind of how you show up physically, and like what you would wear, if you would hold yourself different, if your rituals would be different, if things you do during the day would be different. But so much of that, what you said, is true. It's like, how do you show up to everything you do, right? Because that's even more important than all the different things.
Yeah. I mean, powerful, deep. As as we so as we round the curve here towards the end of this podcast, I want to ask you, like, as far as you are concerned, and with everything going on right now, what is the thing that you are like the most excited about, and want to talk about the most? Like, what is like so thrilling to you that you want to share, that you could just talk about for hours? And let's just go into that for a second too, because I want to honor, like, even you, like what you bring to the table. I've been asking you all these questions, but like, what is Cassandra really like thrilled about what's going on in your life and the world right now?
I'm really excited. The most exciting thing that's going on right now is I am creating this thing called Divinely Design Your Life, and simultaneously writing a book on it. And it's pretty much it's a program, right? But the main concept of it is that everything is divine, and you can utilize everything in your life to bring the vision that you have for your life into reality. Like, it's all either a blessing or a lesson. And I kind of distilled, I feel like it's been like the project of my career. So it feels super exciting for it, like, finally to be coming together in a way of just having all these years to like work with people and marinate on it and like perfect it and like tweak it, and like really feel like I have like a really solid process together that I can walk people through. Because so many people are like, how do you do it? And I'm like, oh, I can coach you through it. But it's like, no, this is like the flippin' process. And so going on that adventure of actually clarifying all that, and like going down those rabbit holes of like, one of the modules that I've been working on recently that I am just really loving just because it, in the exploration of the, go as I'm doing all this and like recording it and writing it and stuff, I'm like going even deeper into it. And so anyway, so there's one called Distractions Are Divine, and talking about how even our distractions are divine. Like, even whether it's like a literal distraction, like a cell phone ping, or our anxiety or overwhelm, like, it's all divine. And what if we stop? Because this was like one of my biggest things. Like, one of the things I had to, once I worked through the foundational stuff, and the foundational stuff is like the stuff we talked about, like getting clear on your source, cleaning up that mess, getting clear on what like the vision for your life is, getting clear on what fears and beliefs and what root wounds from your childhood are in the way, so you can clear all of that stuff out. But then in getting into the quantum embodiment and getting all that going, so now we're like manifesting, magnetizing, things are happening. But then there's like all this other like life stuff we have to deal with, right? Because we don't just like do this work in isolation. We're still humans doing life. And so it's how do you start seeing like everything as divine in a really genuine way? And so to challenge myself, I was like, what is the one thing I have a really hard time thinking? And there's two, but the other one is I think it's less fun. But this one, I was like, okay, how is my overwhelm divine? How is the fact that I'm the most easily distractible person ever divine, right? And it's something I've disliked about myself, right? So trying to like overcome this. Anyway, so going into it and really realizing that in those moments that if we lean into it, instead of seeing it, so often when we think of like distractions or we think of anxiety or overwhelm, the things that can kind of like interrupt our flow and our work day, what are we going to do? We see them as like blocks. Like I just hit a wall, right? Sometimes we even say that, like I just hit a wall, right? And I can't, I couldn't go further on the project or whatever. What if we saw them as divine? What if the distractions were actually guiding us to something that we needed, right? So what if it's not an accident that, my ADD or whatever made me go look up that YouTube video and like watch that little thing, because maybe there's something in there that eventually is going to come full circle that I don't know right now, right? But I can trust. And maybe it's not an accident. There's been times where I had to like get stuff done, but I'm really feeling called to go take a walk, and go just like get some fresh air. And the times I resist it and I'm like, no, you can't do it. Like push through, right? Eventually, even if it takes days, because sometimes it will be days, I like will resist it. And I'll go do it. Literally like 15 minutes into the walk, I have like the best idea. And I'm like, I should just took the walk 3 days ago, But even with the anxiety, like the way I think of anxiety and overwhelm is like, we think it's a block, but it's really a closed door that we can like open and walk through. Right. But so many of us are just so like, and so we try to compensate for it.
Yeah.
Right. We try to, either, okay, I have to, and even meditation, like I love meditation. I think everyone should do meditation every day to connect to the divine, get that quiet stillness inside of themselves. But even like meditation when you're anxious, or meditation for that way, you're not really going through the door, right? Like the door would be more of like an inquiry, right? It would be like, oh, why am I feeling anxious right now? What's coming up, right? Allowing ourselves to like lean into this and see what direction, right? Because oftentimes there's clues there. There's things that are, there's some gold in that. And so much of the magic is unleashed when we stop making it bad, right? When we stop treating it as this negative thing. And instead we ask ourselves, okay, well, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Okay, so where is that coming from? Well, I've obligated to too many things today, right? Okay, so what can I do? Well, here's where the overwhelm now becomes like the guru, right? Where it's like, oh, so now the overwhelm is essentially helping you discern the thing that's the most aligned with you to do, right? If you actually just lean into it and just don't say like, oh, I'm overwhelmed, like I don't even know what I was like, I don't even know what people do as far as that goes, like, but for me, I'm overwhelmed. I like go get a snack or something. You go to Instagram or something, I guess. Right. But if instead of doing that, like reflex thing to shift out of it, you lean into it and you ask the questions, then it's actually guiding you. Right. Anyway, I could go on and on about that forever, but that I find fascinating. And I just think it's, I'm super excited about this Divinely Design Your Life program, because I'm creating a community of people who are really willing to do this work and then get to support each other in showing up this way in life, so that they can really change their whole perspective on life while they're, while they're attracting their dreams, and they're allowing that flow to happen, but really own this whole new way of being in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think just like the idea of even what I kind of got from everything that you just described was like bringing more compassion to every aspect of life, even though the things that you see it as a distraction, you get down on yourself, push past it, push through it, just whatever it is. Or like, you get sucked into Instagram and then maybe you get down on yourself. Oh, geez, I just wasted an hour, right? Like bringing more compassion of like, okay, well, what did I learn from it? What gifts were there for me in that? Right. And that even in and of itself is like it could be a very massive uh conversation, even just speaking to like the whole social dilemma, kind of aspect of like there's a supercomputer pointed at your brain trying to get your attention out of it. So having compassion for yourself, dealing with those kind of structures in life, that takes effort to like to just be your most loving, authentic self.
Absolutely. And it's like that famous quote, success is moving from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm.
I
Um,
like that. I like that.
I think it's the truest thing about success, success in like life overall, right? Is like the more that, like, the less time you spend like beating yourself up for stuff, the faster you can just get on with the next thing, right? The next aligned thing. And you create more momentum that way. And confidence, honestly, that way, which helps with
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. That's awesome. So Cassandra, for people who are like tuning in and they want to like learn more, they want to connect with your course, discover how they can turn their distractions into blessings, blessings and lessons, which we could probably start. You have my permission to use the term blessings if you want to.
Lessons.
They're blessings. Where could people find you, and how do they connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find me. I'm active on Instagram at Cassandra Bodzak, on TikTok, Cassandra Bodzak, Facebook, all the things, Cassandra Bodzak. YouTube is Cassandra Bodzak. There's tons of free content on there, free meditations, downloads. It's Divine Downloads with Cassandra Bodzak. It's on iTunes, iHeart Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all the places you can listen to podcasts. But yeah, and I'll give you a link so that if anybody wants to, I have a meditation, a PM meditation, and a walking meditation, because I also like doing that. That are all about like tuning yourself into the connecting with the divine, connecting with your divine support squad, and holding that vision for your day. So if anybody wants to give that a whirl, I'll give you the link to that.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll post the links in the comments of this video. And that's also awesome. You are literally everywhere. It's very easy to find you. It sounds like whatever channel
you prefer, there's something.
You can find you. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast today. This was really fun.
This was so fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. Well, have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll look forward to having you on again sometime.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks so much. Have
Thanks,
a good
Cassandra.
one.
All right. Bye. Bye, everyone.